and welcome. I'm Ann Scheel, Resource Manager of Student and Faculty Webinars at the Writing Center. We're so glad that you're here today. We know that you're very busy, so we want to thank you first of all for taking time to join us, whether you're here with us live or whether you're watching the recording. We are really looking forward to today's webinar. Let's quickly cover a few housekeeping things before I introduce our presenter today. First, we are recording this webinar, so you're welcome to access it later via our webinar archive. It should be up by the end of the week, and you'll receive an email with the link. We actually record all of our webinars at the Writing Center, so you're welcome to look through that archive for other recordings that might also interest you. The slides for today are available for download in a PDF format. There's also a certificate of attendance if you'd like to download that, and both of those are available in the Files pod below the slides in the webinar room. You can download those now or throughout the webinar, or if you're watching the recording. The links in the presentation should be live, but if they don't work for you, they are all active in the slides. However, do note that if you're joining us from a mobile device, the slides aren't available for download, and in that case, you can access them later through the webinar recording, or if you want to email us at wcwebinars@waldenu.edu. We welcome you to participate throughout the webinar in the chat box. If you have any technical trouble or questions that you'd like Michael to address during the Q&A portion, then please post those to the Q&A pod. I'll be watching that throughout the webinar and will be happy to help you behind the scenes. Though do note also that there is a help option at the top right corner of your screen, and that's Adobe's technical support. So that's the best place to go if you need further technical help. Lastly, our captioning is available today, although it looks a little bit different than usual. Instead of appearing within the room itself, there is a link to captioning in the links pod below the slides. So our presenter today is Michael Dusek, and our co-facilitator is Max Philbrook. And Michael and Max are both writing instructors at the Writing Center, so you might have had the pleasure of working with them in various services, and particularly our paper review service, which Michael will be talking a little bit about during the presentation. So thanks again for joining us, and with that, I will hand it over to you, Michael.
All right, awesome. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Again, this is really about master's level writing. I think as you enter a master's program, you know that there's going to be kind of a change in what's expected of you in terms of the writing that you put out. The purpose of this webinar really is to talk about some of the differences or some of the unique attributes of master's level writing. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the expectations that you can have in entering a master's course, and the writing expectations specifically that you can have. And we're going to take a look at some of the resources that we offer here in the Walden Writing Center to help you as you take on this challenge of a master's program. So thank you, Anne, for this awesome introduction. Thank you, Max, for your help behind the scenes here. And I guess I'm just waxing on a little bit to offer a hearty welcome to you all. I hope you guys are having a good day. Today's topics, kind of things to expect from this webinar. We're going to talk about some of the unique needs of master's students, some of the unique approaches of master's students, right? Kind of what sets master's students apart from undergrad or doctorate students. We're going to talk about some of the characteristics of master's level writing, some of the genre conventions of master's level writing. Really what I mean here is some of the features of master's level writing that set it apart from other genres of writing. And as I mentioned before, we're going to talk about some resources that we offer in the Walden Writing Center that can hopefully smooth out this transition and be helpful to you as you continue your master's program. Before we dive in, one more thing. As Ann mentioned, I do anticipate having some time at the end of this webinar for questions, for kind of a Q&A back and forth. So if there's something that you want to know or something that's on your mind regarding master's level writing, feel free to save that question for the end, and hopefully I'll have a little bit of time to get to that. Okay, cool. First, let's start with a little bit of a chat here, a little bit of a general thing. In the chat box, I'd like you to, if you feel comfortable, share a writing success that you've had lately. Again, this can be something big or something small. You can draw this from kind of your academic pursuits or from your professional life, or this can even be something personal. In the chat box, again, if you feel comfortable, go ahead and share a writing success that you've had recently. As you do this, I guess I'll share. Recently, about middle December, I finished a longer project that I've been working on for a number of months. It was a conference-length research piece, research, essay that I've been working on dealing with how the notion of invitational rhetoric can be used within asynchronous writing centers. I know that's a total mouthful, but for me personally, when I finished that larger project, that was a really, it felt successful, right? It felt like something I'd accomplished something. So that's my recent success. I'm going to go on mute for a minute and kind of take a look at what you guys are sharing. So yeah, if you feel comfortable, throw that in the chat box in the next couple minutes, and then we'll. All right, I'm seeing some really interesting stuff come into the chat box here. There's a really kind of a variety of answers. One student I see, finished their first book last year. That's incredible. That way to go. That's really cool. Others sharing, maybe longer form essays that they completed in their undergrad, which is awesome. I saw one, a student shared that they crafted a successful business plan. That's really awesome too in that kind of more professional setting. I'll give you guys, if you want to share, if you feel comfortable doing so, I'll give you another 30 seconds to put your answer in the chat box, and then we're going to move on. Okay, again, in looking at the chat box, I think I'm kind of humbled, right? There's a lot of really awesome writers in there, but if you feel like maybe you're not the most comfortable with your academic writing, that's totally acceptable too. I remember when I first entered into my master's program, I didn't really know what to expect, and there was a lot of anxiety around that. So if that's more what you're feeling at this moment, just know that you're not alone, and that I sympathize with you. Okay. One thing that this chat kind of demonstrated and was meant to kind of demonstrate is that everybody's approaching their master's program really from a different level of writing experience, right? And everyone kind of approaches their master's program kind of with a different motivating factor, right? For some of you, you have professional or academic reasons for pursuing a degree. Excuse me. This might look like, looking for a job promotion or a change of career path. That's really common that we see in the Writing Center for students who are returning for a master's program. Students in a master's program might not necessarily be acquiring skills for future publication, right? When we look at like maybe a doctorate program, you're really trying to develop skills that can allow you to publish in the academy and academic writing journals. But that might not be the case for you at a master's level, and that's totally okay too. Again, we're all really kind of approaching this from a different point of view or from a different angle. You may be returning to academic writing after a long absence. It had been a few years since I wrote a scholarly piece that I intended to kind of submit to others, and it did feel like I was returning after a long time, and it was kind of a daunting challenge. So if that's something you're feeling, I sympathize with that too. Students at a master's level may not have in-depth training in academic writing. And we encounter this a lot in the Writing Center, where students will have, degrees and be very accomplished professionally in their field, but really haven't gotten that, training in academic writing. So if, that's not an uncommon place to be at either. Being that master's programs are often shorter, you have kind of less time to develop your writing skills, so it can feel kind of packed together. Yet another feeling that I sympathize with here. And the last bullet point on this slide I know is something that rings true for many, many master students. And it's really about the challenge of finding a work-life balance, right? Being a student whilst also balancing some of the demands of your personal life is something that I think all master students struggle with or find challenge in, maybe better said. So yeah, the purpose of this slide is to recognize that in a master's program, we're all kind of coming from a different angle, and there may be different levels of experience, different motivating factors, and really different challenges for each student at a master's level. But then let's talk a little bit, we're going to transition here and talk a little bit about the characteristics of master's level writing. What does master's level writing look like, right? How is this different from other academic writing, maybe undergrad, maybe doctorate writing? In general, how is this a unique thing? And when we think about scholarly writing at any level, there are a few characteristics that are really worth noting, but these characteristics kind of become more important and more valued as you go on in your academic career, right? At an undergraduate level, these characteristics are going to be present. At a master's level, these characteristics are going to be present in a stronger capacity, and they're going to be a little bit more rigidly adhered to. At a doctorate level, it's going to be kind of the top of the mountain here. These scholarly writing attributes are going to be present in a really, really strong way. But just as kind of a basic entry level here in talking about scholarly writing, one feature, one characteristic of scholarly writing is the use of evidence, specifically evidence from scholarly sources. And when I say scholarly sources, what I mean is a piece that's been peer-reviewed, a piece that's been published in a peer-reviewed academic journal. This is the highest form of evidence. I guess I could go into why this is, but I'm going to move on for the sake of time. But this peer review process is really important, and in many ways verifies that the source that you're using is of really high quality, that the work that's being presented, the conclusions that are being presented in this source have been verified by other authorities in this field. So again, you're going to see scholarly sources in scholarly writing, sure. Proper use of research to avoid plagiarism. Yeah, so you're going to be using a notation style to give credit to the sources that you're drawing from to support your argument. And you're going to be formatting those and notating that in a standardized, appropriate way. Use of style guide for citations and formatting. I think reference formatting specifically. Yep, that's kind of what I was mentioning above when I was talking about avoiding plagiarism. You're going to be using the language of the academy. Language like APA style would be an example of one. There are others, but scholarly writing is going to draw upon one of these academic notation styles, or one of these citation and formatting styles like APA style. Scholarly writing is going to have a logical organization. So there's going to be, kind of a logical, this comes first, this comes second, this comes third type of organization in scholarly writing. And that's something that the reader expects, but it's also something that can help lead the reader through your argument. That is, again, just another feature, another characteristic that is often found in scholarly writing is that logical organization. Lastly, the notion of scholarly voice is also, or scholarly tone, is also present within scholarly writing. What I mean by that is you're going to have a unbiased, an objective tone. You're going to be, not representing things in a biased way, right? You want to come off as an objective party for the reader. You're going to be using a formal tone, so you're not going to be addressing the reader in a casual way. This is really going to be more of a formal discussion. So those are just a couple attributes of scholarly voice that I think bear mentioning just right off the bat here too. Before we move on from this slide, I would like to note that these hyperlinks here are, again, active, as Anne mentioned in her introduction to this webinar. So if these are topics that you'd like to learn more about, go ahead and click on these and you can kind of explore from there. Also, we're going to be talking about Writing Center resources later on in this webinar, but I just wanted to mention that if these are topics that you might not be familiar with or topics that you want to research and cultivate more in your own writing, that these are active links and these are good resources that you can use there. Taking a look at master's level versus undergraduate writing, then we do see some pretty stark differences. Looking and comparing these two, just in general, we can kind of see the difference here and how one pushes more of a kind of scholarly, intellectual approach. In undergraduate writing, oftentimes a student is going to be asked to summarize. They're going to be asked to kind of repeat what they're reading to kind of demonstrate that they understand a source. Generally, you're going to be using a single source. As I mentioned, you want to demonstrate this understanding of the course content. Think about like a short answer test, right? Where you're being asked to remember things about a chapter that you read in a textbook. This is kind of what we think about when we think about undergraduate writing. In undergraduate writing, you're going to be provided with course readings, and you're oftentimes going to be using sources like textbooks, websites, and course handouts in responding to assignment prompts. Graduate level writing really takes a pretty marked shift here. Rather than summary, rather than repeating what you've encountered before, graduate writing is going to be looking for or more preoccupied with the notion of analysis. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but analysis isn't just repeating what you've read, right? Analysis asks you for analysis to take place, you need to offer your own interpretation or amplification of source material. It's kind of your own, it's your own interpretation. But really, when I think of analysis, I think about working with sources, using source information to support something of your own. And again, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a couple slides here. In graduate writing, you're often going to be using more than one source, two or more sources. And that brings up the notion of synthesis, or bringing multiple sources together in conversation with one another. And we're going to talk about synthesis in a later slide as well. But the point I'm making here is you're not just using one source, right? You're drawing from the ideas of multiple scholars. It's not enough to just repeat the notion or to summarize the views of one scholar. You are bringing multiple scholars together. Rather than understanding content at a graduate level, you're really being asked to add to content. You're being asked to lend your own voice to some of the conversations that you're researching and that you're familiar with. Yeah. As I mentioned, research is an important component of master's or graduate level writing. And you're going to be drawing upon studies, published studies that use statistical data or that put forth a supported argument. So again, this is just kind of some of the differences between undergraduate and graduate writing. But looking at this more broadly, you can see how graduate writing is really asking you to engage with scholarship in a more deep or in-depth way, right? You're not just being asked to report on what you've learned. You, in fact, are being asked to bring ideas together and offer something new, your own interpretation of what you've collected. To further illustrate this, let's take a look at the difference between an assignment prompt in an undergraduate course versus a graduate course. And as I do this, I'm going to read through each of these. If you guys want to put in the chat box some of the differences that you're noticing between the undergraduate assignment prompt and the graduate assignment prompt, that would be awesome too. But again, I'm going to read through this. A typical undergraduate assignment prompt might sound something like this. This week, you will examine the characteristics of a successful distance learner. Objectives. Explain the effectiveness of instructional interactions in distance learning environments. Describe the metaphors for learning as they apply to distance learning environments. Identify the attributes of successful distance learning. So you're picking up off of the previous slide and looking at some of the, the words here, the wording, the verbiage on this undergraduate assignment prompt. You can see that it's asking you to really summarize what has been discussed in the course already. You're going to explain, you're describing, you're identifying here. It's not really asking you to apply that knowledge or to craft an argument. It's really asking you to tell the reader what you found in terms of distance learning, taking a few different approaches there. When we look at a graduate course or graduate assignment prompt, things become a little bit different. This week, you will analyze the characteristics of a successful distance learner. So you're not reporting on these characteristics or examining them, you're analyzing them. You're kind of picking apart what makes up a successful distance learner. The objectives here, analyze education policies. So you're reflecting on how education policies play into this conversation. You're not reporting on what education policies may exist. You are analyzing that. So you're thinking about what education policies maybe work better than others. You're thinking about maybe some of the attributes of specific education policies that make them effective, right? You're analyzing that. You're bringing in your own analysis. Analyze in the influence of education policies on the roles of educational psychologists. So we're again, this is the analysis piece, right? We're thinking about how these things play out. Analyze ways to improve education policy effectiveness. Sure. Develop an annotated bibliography. So there's that research piece, right? You're going to be collecting and annotating outside sources in this topic area. And begin to synthesize education philosophy research. As some of you noticed here, noted in the chat box, the graduate assignment prompt is a lot more in-depth, right? You're being asked to really immerse yourself more in this topic area and look at some of the connections between these topic, the subtopics within that larger topic area, but also the scholarship that you're encountering as you research that topic area. The undergraduate assignment prompt is really more about reporting what you found. The graduate assignment prompt has a lot more to do with analysis and applying the notions that you found, thinking about how they fit into this larger conversation. I think a lot of you got that in the chat box as well. I hope that that's clear. Now, I mentioned it, in the last slide, I talked a little bit about building an argument, right? In graduate level writing, you are taking the step from reporting or from informing the reader about a certain topic or certain phenomena, and you are now being asked to craft an argument, to take a stance about that phenomena. And this is really a key attribute of master's level writing. You are going to be asked to take a stand in the writing that you do at a master's and at a doctoral level. So crafting an argument becomes a really central piece there. When you craft an argument, you, as I mentioned, take a stance, make a claim, contribute to the current conversation on your topic. It's not enough to just inform a reader. For example, saying something like, I'm going to talk about psychology, right? This isn't an argument, right? You're informing the reader. You're telling the reader where you're going to go with this paper. Instead, you need to make an argument in that topic area. Educational psychology is a central feature of distance learning, to use kind of our example from the previous slide. You're making an argument that one aspect of psychology is important to this other thing. And then the rest of your piece is going to lay out how that is important or why that is important. But again, you're going to be asked to take a stance, to make a claim, and to contribute something, your own argument, to the current conversation in this topic area. You're going to be providing readers with a position, with your perspective, and your point of view on the topic. So that's yours. This is your own contribution to this argument. Your perspective, your position, your argument is what you're contributing here. Lastly, you're going to support your argument with evidence, findings from credible and scholarly sources that you read. So yeah, this is really an important notion here. As you take a stance, the evidence that you're using, the research that you're bringing into your writing is really meant to support the argument that you're making, right? This is your evidence. This is how you know that your argument is correct, right? Or is well supported, maybe better said. So as you think about crafting an argument, everything that you bring into that essay should in some way support that central argument that you're making. Okay. Now, to pick apart what I mean a little bit more by analysis, I'm going to talk through this, get you a definition about what analysis is, and then we're going to look at an example of analysis, as you can see on the bottom of the slide here. So when you analyze source material, you contextualize and explain the evidence for the reader, right? You are offering an interpretation of the evidence that you are providing. I often tell students that analysis connects the main idea of a paragraph to the evidence that you're offering that supposedly supports that main idea, right? So we talked about arguments a second ago and how evidence is used to support your argument. You lay out an argument for the reader, you offer evidence that supports that argument. Your analysis then tells the reader specifically how that evidence supports the main idea here or supports your argument. You're reflecting on what that evidence means in the context of your argument, in the context of the conversation that you're presenting. You know, that's a little bit wishy-washy or just kind of a little bit jumbled, but that's really how I think about analysis. Analysis connects the main idea or your argument and the source material that you're using to support that argument. And this kind of maybe is better said in this second bullet point here, where you tell the reader why the evidence is important. What does that evidence mean? And how is that evidence connecting to the ideas in your writing? That's a more succinct way of getting at kind of what I'm talking about here. Again, before we move on to this example, analysis is that connection piece. When you are using analysis in your writing, you are kind of connecting the dots for the reader and showing the reader how the evidence that you're using is supporting the argument that you're making. Okay, I hope that made sense. Take a look at an example of analysis here. We have a piece of source material, and then followed after that source material is a bit of analysis in bold. So here's our source material. 68% of Dallas high school juniors reported chronic boredom in math class. So in this example, we're making a point that this evidence supports, that this 68% of Dallas high school juniors reporting chronic boredom in math class supports. Okay? So here we have a piece of evidence, and then the analysis piece comes right after that, which suggests a need to reconsider the math curriculum and invest in teacher training in this district. Yeah, this bold part of the example answers this kind of so what question. So what? 68% of Dallas high school juniors are bored in math. So what? What does that mean? Why should I care? Well, what that says, to interpret that, is it says that this school district needs to develop a different math curriculum that is more engaging to students. In this way, you're connecting the dots for the reader. If I were to just include this evidence, okay, the 68% piece, it might be obvious to me what needs to happen from there or what interpretation I'm taking from that piece of evidence, but it might not be the same for the reader, right? You can't really assume that the reader is taking the same idea or the same interpretation from that evidence that you are. Analysis specifically, explicitly, tells the reader what they are to take from a piece of evidence. Again, it answers this so what question, or the question of why is this evidence important. And before I move on, I just want to say that I didn't do this research and I have nothing against Dallas high school math classes. Synthesis then is really closely related to analysis, okay? So when you are analyzing, as I mentioned, you're using this piece of evidence and you're telling the reader why that evidence is important, right? How this evidence supports the point that you're making. When you're synthesizing, you're bringing multiple pieces of evidence together, okay? When you synthesize material, you are comparing, you're contrasting, or you're combining ideas, okay? Synthesis demonstrates scholarship. it demonstrates your understanding of the literature, and it demonstrates your ability to connect information and develop an argument. Okay, so the kind of example, or maybe the metaphor, that's better said. The metaphor that is often used with synthesis is the idea of like a dinner party, okay? So say you're researching a topic, and you found 5 authors that all have something to say about this topic. Synthesis, or the metaphor of synthesis is if you were sitting at a table, and at every seat was one of the scholars that you have encountered that speaks about this topic. So imagine them sitting around this table, right? You and these 5 scholars. If you bring up this topic, each of the 5 scholars is going to have something different to say. Okay, they're going to have a different approach to this specific topic. One scholar approaches it this way, another scholar approaches it a different way, a third scholar approaches it in a different way as well. Synthesis then is taking these different voices from this conversation at this dinner party and reflecting on the conversation more broadly, right? Maybe you have 2 authors that approach the topic in a similar way. Okay, maybe you have one author that has a completely different conclusion from another author at the table. Thinking about how these ideas can fit together is what synthesis is all about. Okay, you're bringing these sources together and you're putting them in conversation with each other. This is a pretty, I don't know, it's kind of a heady idea, and it can kind of be difficult to think about how that might work in your own writing until you actually are asked to do it. But synthesis is something that is a really higher order academic activity and something that you want to bring to your writing generally. Before I move on, I'm going to give you one more metaphor that might be useful to you here, and that's the metaphor of the detective. Okay, synthesis in the context of being a detective can occur this way. So like a detective in trying to solve a crime, right? A detective will gather evidence, right? Not unlike a scholarly writer will gather evidence. But each piece of evidence that a detective gathers is going to add to their picture of a crime scene, right? So maybe you have different pieces of evidence that all add up to a picture of a crime scene. Synthesis works in the same way. Each scholar is going to be adding kind of a piece to your overall picture of what's going on in a topic area. Okay, metaphors aside, I'm going to move on. But again, synthesis and analysis are really connected, and these are strong characteristics that are found in master's level writing and in scholarly writing more broadly. So, common expectations of writing at a master's level. These are some features, again, that we kind of just put together here in a bulleted list to give you an idea of some things to expect in master's level writing. First, you need to participate more fully in the writing process. So this is linked here on the slide, but when we think about the writing process in the Writing Center, we think about things like pre-writing, right? So thinking about things before you actually write. We think about drafting or putting your ideas on paper. We think about revision and editing as also being part of this writing process. At a master's level, you're going to need to dive into this process more fully. And by that, I mean you're going to do multiple revisions on a piece that you're doing. You're going to produce multiple drafts. You're going to really be digging into this writing process more fully. We often talk about the writing process as being iterative or being recursive. By that, what I mean is you're going to be going through the writing process multiple times for each draft that you produce of a larger project. You're going to think of an idea. You're going to kind of think about what you want to say about that idea. You're going to draft a draft there. You're going to, from that draft, you're going to revise that draft to try to make it better. This will give you more ammunition, if you will, for what else you need to bring to that draft. So things like possible further research areas that you need to participate in. Then you will produce another draft, and you will again revise that draft, and the process continues over and over until you hopefully feel good about that piece. So again, this is just something that you should be prepared for, is to participate more fully in the writing process. 2, conduct deeper, more thorough research? Yeah. So in undergrad writing, grabbing a couple sources that speak to your topic, kind of plugging them into your piece where they seem appropriate, that probably was enough to constitute effective writing at that level. In a master's program, you're really going to need to be more thorough there. Collect not just any old source that relates to your topic, but the best sources that relate most directly to your topic. So that's something to really expect also. When I think about higher level scholarly writing, I think really about finding some of those foundational, those germinal texts within your topic area, and also working with theory. So like theories that inform some topic areas in your specific field. These are going to be things that are really important to include at a higher level when maybe they were more glossed over in a lower level academic writing situation. You're going to rely more heavily on paraphrases rather than direct quotations. Yeah, so in master's level writing, in doctorate level writing, paraphrase is really favored to quoting. And this is because paraphrase is a higher order intellectual activity, right? It takes more intellectual thought, takes more engagement, it takes more understanding of a source to be able to put it into your own words rather than just to grab a piece of language from that source and put it into your writing. And so by paraphrasing, you are demonstrating a stronger understanding, really, of that source. So that's why paraphrase is favored in higher level academic writing. Use specific language and terminology from your field. Yeah, so you're going to be using jargon from your field, things that are commonly used in your field. The important part about this bullet, too, that I want to mention is being specific, right? Academic writing in the U.S. context, being specific about what you're referring to and just as specific as you can in general is something that's really favored there. Include analysis and synthesis. Yeah, as we talked about, engaging with the sources that you collect in your research. You're going to write papers that may expand on simple essay structure with structures such as a literature review. Yeah, so as you go on further, as you're crafting capstone documents or dissertation documents, for those of you who have that as part of your program, you're going to be kind of pushed beyond the limitations of what we think of as a traditional essay format. So you're going to be using things like a literature review at the beginning of an essay to really bring the reader up to speed as to the current situation within your field. So yeah, the style of writing changes a little bit. You're going to use APA style here at Walden. That American Psychological Association, that is the preferred notation style of the social sciences. So you're going to be using that style as you kind of step into some of those social science conversations. And you're going to begin to enter and contribute to the academic conversation as a scholar with developing expertise in your field. You're going to be crafting your own arguments that are different than the arguments that are already out there. Again, you're going to be using your research, using the arguments that you encounter as evidence to support your argument, but you are in that way of having your own argument, you are going to be adding a new voice to your field, which is, kind of exciting and kind of daunting, but it is something that you're going to get more used to and something you're going to be more comfortable with, taking a stand, right? Building an argument that is your own. And just to clarify here for a second, some master's programs do have a capstone project. Dissertations do not. Some do not, right? Many do have doctoral programs do have a dissertation at the end, but some do not. So if in me talking about master's capstones or theses and doctoral dissertations, if this is something that doesn't apply to your program, then disregard my mention of them. But these higher order scholarly writing characteristics are still going to be present in your upper coursework. I just wanted to mention that as a disclaimer. Okay, let's turn again to the chat box. I see you guys have been using the chat box as this goes along. That's really awesome. Let's take a minute then for a little bit of a focus question. What writing challenges do you face as you work towards your master's degree? So reflect for a minute on some of the challenges that you face or that you anticipate facing as you work towards your master's degree as it relates to your academic writing. I'm going to go on mute for a minute or two here and give you the the option to participate in the chat box if you feel comfortable. Okay, I'm seeing some awesome responses coming in, and as with our first chat, I mean, these are really diverse and unique responses. You know, students talking about paraphrasing and you know, drawing passages from a text and putting it into your own words. I have students talking about, you know, other attributes of success of academic writing, things like organization. I have students talking about returning to academic writing after a really long period of not participating in academic writing. Yeah, that's totally normal too. Developing a strong, nuanced understanding of a topic, working on flow and organization of ideas. Yeah, these are all really relevant responses. And they strike me as really honest reflection as well. So that's awesome. Thank you guys. Let's go about maybe 20 or 30 more seconds. If you feel comfortable here, go ahead and put your response in the chat box, and then I'm gonna Okay, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move on here, but thank you guys. For those of you who chose to participate, you know, that's awesome. Thank you. Good job. Okay, to the resources portion of this webinar. You know, and before I get into these, I want to put in a plug for myself and my colleagues here. You know, we at the Walden Writing Center, we work really hard to offer resources that are helpful to students, maintain them for their accuracy, and you know, build new resources as the need arises for that. So I would encourage all of you to really take a look at some of the resources that we have, and a good place to start would be just our General Writing Center homepage, which you can bookmark. And that's the point of this slide here. We have just a General Writing Center website that is searchable, that you can look up a myriad of academic writing topics here that have pages of their own. Really a wide variety of resources are available just as web pages here. So for those of you who are just starting in your master's program, or those of you who are encountering new writing challenges, I would definitely recommend that you bookmark the homepage here, the Writing Center homepage. It's academic guides at waldenu.edu/writing center. It's a great resource, and again, there's a lot there to explore. So that would be kind of the first point of contact, or maybe a great jumping off point for those of you who are looking for more academic writing resources. From there, we also offer a Writing Center blog, and I know that Max was really instrumental in bringing a lot of these blog posts, excuse me, to have a life of their own. You know, when I think about a blog, it's like a website, only it's a lot more personal. It's like kind of a website meets a newspaper article. And there's a really wide variety, again, of academic writing topics there that are discussed and kind of explored from more of a personal, informal perspective. So if a blog's more your speed, more your style, it's linked here. Go ahead and check that out. There's some really awesome blog posts there on, again, a really wide variety of academic writing topics. We have a WRITECAST is our podcast episodes for those of you who are into podcasts. If you want to sit down and listen for a little while, or listen in the car on the way to work, what have you, there's a podcast option available for you. So yeah, if this is kind of your speed, for sure check this out. And I'm a little ways into this, but I'm throwing a lot of resources at you here. And again, well, not again, I haven't mentioned this yet, but it's really about finding what works for you, right? Some of these might not be kind of your style, or might not be as useful to you, but I'm willing to bet that at least one approach to some of these academic resources is going to be something that you could really benefit from. So I just wanted to mention that. If some of these sound less applicable to you, that's fine. But I just want to make you aware of their being available. email support. So if you have a writing question and you want to ask a writing instructor like myself, Max, or Ann, this is the place to do it. This writing support at waldenu.edu email address is the place to bring this question. And this is monitored every day. So expect a response to your email inquiry within 24 hours. And we are open 7 days a week there. So again, if you have a question, this would be a great place to ask it. Moving on then, let's talk a little bit about our paper review service. This is a kind of a keynote service in the Writing Center. Essentially, it's an asynchronized individual feedback. You will get asynchronous individualized feedback from a writing instructor like myself or like Max, right? So what will happen is you'll submit your work, and actually we're going to talk about the logistics on the next slide, but essentially it's a way for you to get individualized feedback on your writing. We're going to cover mini writing lessons with you in the confines of that specific paper review. I have a review here on the right. If that's something that sounds good to you, by all means take a look at that review and yeah, give this a try. Some logistics of how this works. You're going to make appointments in our MyPass scheduling system. MyPass is just the kind of trademark name for a scheduling system that we use. You can find that link there. You'll make a profile, and then you'll be able to make an appointment with a writing instructor, again, like Max or myself. You're allowed to make 3 appointments per week. So you can actually submit 3 drafts a week or submit 3 versions of a draft in a week if that's something that you're interested in doing. It is asynchronous, so it's not live, right? So you don't need to be on the phone or call in at a specific time. You will submit your piece, and the feedback will be provided to you the day of the appointment or the day after. So you'll upload a piece to your appointment form in MyPass. A writing instructor like Max or myself will download that. We'll put our feedback on there using track changes and the comment feature of Microsoft Word, and we will then return that to you. We'll actually reattach it to the assignment, or excuse me, to the appointment form, and you can retrieve that whenever you'd like. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, this is a great resource. Again, it's individualized for each student, and I would encourage all of you to take advantage of this. This is covered as part of your tuition, and really something that if you want individualized writing attention, this is the place to get it, and I would recommend it to any of you. Okay, another resource we offer is webinars. You made it here today, so obviously you know that the webinars exist. Here's a link to the webinars page, but again, these cover a wide range of topics, and we do record our sessions. So if there's a topic that you're interested in that we've done a webinar on in the past, but aren't doing a webinar on in the next few months or so, the previous webinar is recorded, and you can access that through our webinar archive. So that's linked there as well, and you can find our calendar link there too for upcoming webinars that might interest you in the future. Modules. So yeah, we also offer some modules regarding to help you with your academic writing. And what these are self-paced, interactive tutorials and diagnostic quizzes. So these are there'll be a short course, and then there'll be a small test at the end. Topics ranging from grammar, plagiarism prevention, APA references, citations and style, academic paragraphing. Yeah, you can find modules on all of these topics. We also offer some resources for specific student populations. Students with disabilities, we encourage you to register at Disability Services. There's a phone number there and also an email address. If that's something that applies to you, accommodations will be made for you in paper reviews or other services that we offer. So please do let us know there. Transcripts and closed captioning are also available for Writing Center multimedia resources. So again, if this is something that would benefit you, please do reach out to the disabilities@waldenu.edu email address and let us know so we can make accommodations for you. International and multilingual students, there's a number of resources specifically designed for you that are linked right here. This is a great jumping off point for you. If that applies to you, I recommend that you take advantage of that. Also, students in the military, we have specific resources available for you that are linked here. So again, if any of these apply to your situation, feel free to reach out and take advantage of these. This is something that is really important to us in the Writing Center, and we really want to accommodate for all students. So please feel free to take advantage of these if these apply to you. Lastly, I think we have a lot of resources, right? Which I think is kind of the point of these last 8 or 9 slides. But yeah, we have resources that are specific for some different commonly occurring assignments. Discussion posts are the first 2 here that you can see. Responding to another's post. Yeah, just really based on the assignment that you're tackling, we have specific resources for those. Annotated bibliographies. There's a number of resources linked here. Also for literature reviews, you can see there's kind of resources that are specifically linked here for that. So yeah, feel free to go back and take a look at these slides after the webinar and access any of these resources that would be of help for you. Literature reviews as well, sure. And there's a bunch of stuff here. You know, I don't want you to feel like if you're encountering difficulties with your writing that you have nowhere to turn, right? Or that this is just you kind of banging your head against the wall, unable to get the help that you need. We want to help you. In the Writing Center, that is really our focus. We are here to help students, and that is our approach to the work that we do. So I want you to just kind of keep that in mind when you think, you know, you're ready to access resources through the Writing Center. Master's Capstones, more resources there for you as well. You know, we have another chat here. What resources discussed today will be the most useful to you? So take a second, reflect on this. I'm going to move on from this, but go ahead and put this in the chat box. I want there to be, you know, 5 minutes or so for questions at the end here. So really what the point of this chat is just reflect upon some of the resources that I've introduced you to here today, and think about which ones have kind of piqued your interest and you might return to and use in your future academic writing. After this webinar, you know, there are a couple of next steps that I would recommend. First, visit and explore the Getting Started for Master's Students webpage. That's an awesome place to start as a jumping off point. Also, as the number 2, you know, schedule a paper review appointment. Again, this is a great service, and really this is our main way of interacting with students on an individual basis. So, you know, if you feel like you want help with your academic writing, this is the best way to get it. So I'd recommend that you take advantage of these, especially of the paper review resource here. Okay, so with that, let's turn. We have about 6-7 minutes here. And were there any questions that you know, the group might benefit from me talking through?
Yes, thanks, Michael. There were so many good questions in chat and in Q&A today, and I think Max and I were able to address all of them, but one in particular I think would be great to talk about as a group is how do I get over writer's block if I'm struggling to get into my master's writing? Any tips for that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I know that question rings true for a lot of other students, as it certainly rings true for me personally. You know, writer's block is the notion of writer's block sends, you know, chills up my spine. You know, right? Because it's just frustrating when you're trying to write but you can't, or you can't bring yourself to do it. It's super frustrating. A couple things that I would recommend. One, starting very broadly, just kind of brainstorming, doing some of that pre-writing intellectual work can be really useful, and thinking about a topic over time and thinking about some of your own feelings about a topic. When I, you know, I'm writing a paper, I will put in, you know, a lot of time even before I sit down to write that paper, just thinking about it, mulling it over while I'm, I don't know, playing tennis or something, or, you know, while I'm doing the dishes. I'll be kind of thinking about this idea and kind of how I want to approach it. In that same vein, the notion of free writing, or forcing yourself to write for a certain period of time, usually about 5 to 10 minutes, can be really useful too. Really pushing yourself, forcing yourself to continuously write. It can kind of produce some good material that you can then return to and revise. And in that way, yeah, you're kind of getting into the topic. The theorist that talks a lot about free writing describes free writing as a vehicle to help you understand how you feel, right? So in that way, it can kind of give you approaches to your writing that you might not immediately believe are there or immediately recognize as you're kind of racking your brain to think about where to start. Lastly, one thing that helps me a lot personally is crafting an outline. I know that this kind of might butt up against something that would have, by crafting an outline, I think you're kind of breaking writer's block a little bit. You're triumphing over writing writer's block. But the reason I say this is because outlines are a little bit more low stakes, right? This isn't set in stone that this is how your piece is going to be. They're easily changed and reworked. So I sometimes, if I'm having trouble starting, I will start by just crafting an outline and then kind of following that outline through as I produce a draft. Again, this can be kind of an easy way to start thinking broadly about what you want to do, and then as you draft and as you revise, you can kind of sharpen your argument and make that better. Oh, I do have one more before we go on, and that's to not write. Okay, I think sometimes the best way to get past writing challenges is to take a break. Go for a walk, play catch with your son, or whatever you do to kind of unwind and get away from your academic writing. That can be really helpful to then approach your writing the next time. You can kind of gain a new perspective or just kind of approach your writing with new eyes once you've taken a break. And that can be really, really valuable. So if you're having trouble with writer's block or you're having trouble getting started, maybe just kind of stepping away from your research or stepping away from the topic that you've been thinking a lot about can help you when you return to be able to start more easily. Okay, that's kind of how I would answer that. Yeah, you want to take it away?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, that was great. Great tips there. Amy also mentioned in chat that they like to take a walk, and I love that one. That's one of my personal favorite ways to help combat writer's block. So lots of good tips today. We have a couple minutes left, which is perfect. There are a couple things I want to talk about. If you do have any additional questions, everybody, or you think of questions later, please get in touch with us at the email address we mentioned earlier, writingsupport@waldenu.edu. And we chatted a little bit earlier in the webinar about challenges that you have faced or are facing with your master's writing, or maybe you anticipate facing. And we have webinars that address a lot of those challenges in more detail. So I would just encourage you to check out our webinar archive, poke around there a little bit, see if any of those topics are ones that you might like to explore deeper. And in our survey, which I'll mention in a minute, there's also a spot for you to suggest new webinar topics too, if there are ones that we don't have and you'd like to see us offer. So when I close out the webinar room in just a moment, a new browser window will open for you that contains the webinar feedback survey that I mentioned. And I want to just thank you in advance for, first of all, being here and participating with us today, and then also for taking a few minutes to share your feedback in that anonymous survey, which we take very seriously, and we look through all of your comments and suggestions and really try to make these webinars the best that we can for you. And if you're watching the recording, the survey is available for you as well in the links pod below the slides. So again, thanks everybody. This has been so fun today. I'm glad you could join us, and you'll get an email with the recording link by the end of the week. We hope to see you at one of our March webinars, which we'll have up on the website soon. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Max. Bye, everyone.